everyone to an hour with the authors of Star Wars. It's still the first day of DragonCon, it's okay. I'm going to be moderating today. My name is Bryan Young. I write about Star Wars a lot. I do the Full of Sith podcast, and I write Star Wars stuff. Not a novel or anything like all of these fine folks here. I write stuff like trading cards, which is still really fun. But I will introduce each of them, and we'll have some questions. We have a microphone here at the center of the ballroom, and we'll definitely be taking your questions, so think about those. One reminder about questions, the funny thing about them, end in question marks. So think about those questions that you have, and we will ask them for our panel. So immediately to my left, I'd like everyone to give a warm round of applause to Timothy Zahn. It sounds like you've heard of him. He's written a number of books starring his creation, Grand Admiral Thrawn, and really kicked off the expanded universe in 1991 with Heir to the Empire. Now they're warmed up and woo. To Tim's left, we have Michael A. Stackpole, the author of the X-Wing books and I, Jedi. And the creator of Corran Horn, who's now been in Star Wars on the screen. Yep. To Mike's left, we have Delilah Dawson. They jumped on her way faster than you, Mike. Delilah is the author, of course, of books like Phasma and all of a sudden, all of your books, which I've read and loved. I know, Blackspire, which is amazing, and she created Vimerati, who you can go meet in the parks, and is amazing, and I've had like conversations with her creation in the park about Cardinal, and it was really awesome and weird.
I'm glad you could talk to my imaginary friend.
It is bizarre and amazing, and I love it. So everyone, Delilah Dawson. Then to her left, E.K. Johnston. And she wrote she first wrote Ahsoka. And then all of the Padme novels I wish I had 25 years ago. And then to her left is John Jackson Miller. Who wrote Kenobi, A New Dawn, and most recently, in Star Wars anyway, The Living Force. John's also got a Batman book coming soon. Yeah. And I'm wondering, when does it come out? It's October?
October 15th.
Could you sign mine?
I'll send it down this way later.
Okay, could you put it over here?
That would be breaking the embargo.
Don't worry, John, it's his copy, so it'll be his fault.
It is not my possession. I can blame it on John. It's on camera.
First novel tying into the Tim Burton Batman movies. It is a sequel taking place in between Batman and Batman Returns. And it's by my same editor on Star Wars: The Living Force, so it was Random House. And I've never signed one before, so you always do, you may the force be with you, or live long and prosper. What is it here?
I'm Batman. I am vengeance.
Go with a smile. That's
So I want to start by asking
Long Batman.
I want to start by asking each of you really the question we kind of kick these off a lot with. How was it that you entered the world of writing for Star Wars? That's, I think, kind of the big question. And after that, we'll kind of start switching off with questions from the audience too, so if you want to start coming up. But let's start there, and Tim, we'll start with you.
1988, Lou Aronica at Bantam Spectra wrote a letter to Lucasfilm suggesting that Bantam would like to pick up the Star Wars saga where George left off, picking up after Return of the Jedi. Lucasfilm discussed it among themselves for around a year before they finally decided to go with this. They wrote back to Lou and said, find us an author, we'll talk contract. The Bantam editors got together, made up a short list of authors they thought could do Star Wars, sent our names and samples of our writing out to Lucasfilm. They liked my style best of what they've been offered, and so November 1989, I got a call from my agent. I believe it was a Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m., but don't remember these things too well. Saying, Tim, we've got a very interesting offer, and laid it out for me. We discussed it for 45 minutes or so, told him I would give him an answer the next day, then I went off and panicked because this was a chance to jumpstart my career in a way I never could have anticipated. It was also my chance to fall flat on my face in front of millions of Star Wars fans who would never forgive me for ruining their franchise. By the next day, I had enough idea, okay, I can make this into a 300,000 word story, a single story in 3 books. And I still don't know if I can capture the feel of Star Wars, but I'd be crazy not to try it, so I went ahead and accepted. And it so far seems to be working okay.
Well, it worked okay enough that Bantam wanted to do more books. They had bought a 6-book contract or 12-book contract, 12 initially, but they wanted more books. Lucasfilm would not give them another contract, so they said, well, let us license something else, and they licensed the X-Wing computer game. One of their editors called me and said, hey, we're thinking about buying a license for a computer game. You've done computer games, do you think there's any room for novels? And I said, no, not really. You know, computer gamers, they're not really readers, you know. And I had done a bunch of computer games like Wasteland and Bartale 3, so I actually knew the market back then, and it was, you know, and we'd get through this conversation, and it was kind of bad news for them from me. And the editor said, well, that's too bad, because it was, because we were going to buy an X-Wing license. And I said, oh, Star Wars, buy it. And then about 3 months later, at 6 o'clock in the morning, because I live out west, and you know, the call was business call from New York. It's my agent saying, Bantam just called, they offered you 4 Star Wars novels. I said yes. And that was it, and it was the X-Wing license. And so that was, they wanted military science fiction, and they decided I could do it.
Excuse me. So, yeah, it was a little bit different in the 2000s. Nobody ever called me. So I was already a traditionally published writer with, you know, Simon & Schuster, and my friend Chuck Wendig tweeted, I would like to write a Star Wars book, and within a year he had a Star Wars book on the shelf. So I tweeted, back when Twitter worked, I would like to write a Star Wars book. And then there were crickets. Because I was not as well known as him, so you know, I had my agent send books into the Star Wars editors. I asked for introductions from friends to meet them at cons. I did some black magic where I was at Walmart and saw a single Darth Vader cupcake back when I could eat gluten, and I bought it and was like, I'm gonna put this in the freezer, and when I get to write Star Wars, I'm gonna eat it. And after 2 weeks, I was like, screw this. And then the next day I got the email inviting me to write the short story, or the novella for The Force Awakens, the Perfect Weapon, starring Kazim Natal, the bounty hunter. I still have the Darth Vader ring, but yeah, basically, if you're trying to do dark magic, don't put it in the freezer. Like, you apparently have to consume the magic to make it work. And then that led to Phasma, which led to Black Spire, and then I kind of got a reputation for writing violent women.
I have the exact opposite reputation. So it was 2014, and I was working with Hyperion, which was Disney's normal YA imprint. And I was kind of hoping that, like, someday somebody in an office somewhere would realize that there hadn't really been like a YA tradition, like the current definition of YA Star Wars book in a while. And there were like parenting books and business books and like crocheting books, and like hopefully someone would realize that there was like, you know, teenagers. And that meeting had already happened. They had hired Claudia Gray. She wrote Lost Stars. It's still my favorite one. And but I had still sent in a proposal, and my agent sent it to my Disney editor, and my Disney editor sent it to Lucasfilm. And Lucasfilm was like, we're putting some movies together, because it was like November of 2014. We'll be in touch. And eventually, I had submitted a trilogy about Padme and the Handmaidens. And then a few months later, I realized they were going to have me write a book about Ahsoka, and I was like, I need to finish the Clone Wars, which I hadn't done because I was terrified about what was going to happen. And then, so I like powered through, and I was like, oh, that turned out slightly better than I was hoping for. And then I ended up getting the phone call, and my agent was like, so, he always has like this huge, long, rambling lead up where eventually he gets to the point and he's like, yeah, they want you to write a book about a character named AHS, at which point I start making like boiling tea kettle noises, and he was like, so that's a yes then. It's a yes. And you know, now we're 5 books in. And I did write one about
I came in a different direction because long before I wrote for Star Wars, I wrote about Star Wars. 30, oh my God, it's been that long. Years ago, this year, I was editing a magazine called Comics Retailer. We realized that Magic the Gathering and the upcoming Star Wars card game were doing gangbusters, and we knew we needed to hire the smartest person we could find to actually write about the gaming industry for our magazine. And that's when I was introduced to Mr. Michael Stackpole here, who would be a columnist for the magazine monthly for the next 12, 13, however many years it was.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, but in the process of doing this, and also our other magazines that I was in charge of, like Scry, which was the collectible card game magazine, and working for Comics Buyer's Guide and various things, I was covering Star Wars comics and games and video games and other things. 1999, we put out a cash grab, unauthorized guide to Star Wars collectibles, which is the first Star Wars thing that's actually under my name as editor. I remember we sent a copy to Steve Sansweet and said, please don't sue us. And Steve, who was in charge of nothing having to do with whether to sue us or not, made sure that nothing happened. But yeah, I mean, I was writing about the license, and in that time after that, I did some work at Marvel. I wrote a comic book called Iron Man for a year, and at the end of that, and this was 20 years ago this month, I was at a family reunion in Oregon, and we just happened to be close to the Dark Horse Comics offices. And I said to my family, "Do you mind if I take the day and go see these folks?" Because of course, obviously, I know everybody. And while I'm there, I'm like, "Oh, is that Randy Stradley over there, the editor of the Star Wars line?" And oh, what's this? I just happen to have my Year of Iron Man here. And he said that he was actually looking for somebody to do a fill-in issue of Star Wars Empire. I did not know at the time that he was writing it under a pseudonym because he didn't have anybody at the time. And I sent in proposals. That led to the one issue I did of Star Wars Empire, which was just reprinted in the giant omnibus that they did, Star Wars Rebellion Volume 2. And that comic book with Brian Ching, my artist, led them to give us Knights of the Old Republic. And we would do Knights of the Old Republic for over 5 years. That would lead to Prose, Lost Tribe of the Sith, Kenobi, other things.
So I want to ask, it doesn't seem as though anybody's jumped. Oh, we do have a question. So we'll do a question, and then I've got a question for everybody. Question mark.
I just had a question. Were there any ideas, like when you were drafting your books and coming up with the idea and whatever, that like the story group or whoever, the powers that be, were like, no, you can't do that, but you really, you really wanted to put that in? But
We'd never tell you. No, the very first thing I was told was we never talk about what we don't do.
oh, really?
Because somebody will think there's a reason. There were all sorts of things that I didn't put in Knights of the Old Republic because I didn't know whether or not Coder 3 was coming out. And neither really did they. And so we just said, we're just not going to talk about that because we don't know. And of course, they didn't know MMOs were in the horizon or anything, or that Drew Karpyshyn would end up doing a Revan novel. But yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of things where if you give that information out there, suddenly that becomes a story. And that was long before the internet was what the internet is now.
I usually like go for it, and then they're like, "You have to cut this," and I'm like, "Okay." And usually it's an answer. Like my favorite example is Claudia Gray's, where she wanted to use I forget the name of the ship, but it's in the battle for Jakku, and they were like, "You can't," and she's like, "It's a spaceship; it can go wherever it wants," and they're like, "You can't." It's like, okay. And then we see the trailer for The Force Awakens, and it's on its top on the sand, and that's why she couldn't have it in orbit during the book. So it's usually something like that.
I had one recently. In Rise of the Red Blade, there is a rock climbing incident with an animal that attacks. And originally I was like, "You guys have got the best idea. It's a murder moth." And they were like, "No." And I was like, "Well, there's no murder moth." It's like, "I've been on Wikipedia, it doesn't exist." And they were like, "No." And then the Acolyte came out. And like, my husband and I are in bed, and I just jump up and I'm like, "Stop it!" I tried.
I think, back when I was doing stuff, there was a lot more leeway because Lucasfilm was just kind of trying to figure it out. And so what I used to do would be footnote the manuscripts with where I'd taken this from West End Games or from other books and things like that. And occasionally, I needed something that wasn't in any of the other sources. But I noticed I needed a shoulder-launched missile that infantry could use to shoot something down. Well, there was a small rocket you could use, or there was a humongous rocket you could use. And this was like the AT-1, and this was the AT-3. And my footnote, I said, so I've just created the AT-2. It works in between these, and it's suitable for killing this. And LFL said, okay, because it worked. But again, that was early days when they would let us get away with that stuff.
Yeah, I got the at-pit all-terrain personal transport that was a step down from the chicken walker type of thing. They let me get away with that one too. Yeah, typically it was something like, we don't know if George is going to do something with this, so don't touch it, which was great. Which is why I was so happy when they offered me the Chiss Ascendancy books. Okay, so it's Thrawn out in the unknown regions. It's chance to build the Chiss culture from the ground up. It's 600,000 light years from anything they're putting on camera. Great. I'm not going to step on anybody's toes out here. And I didn't.
I kind of want to ask sort of an inverse of that question. Is there anything that they let you get away with that you were like, they should not have let me get away with this?
I had so many explanations ready for mine too, and then they didn't even ask. In Crimson Climb, I decided that my big Indiana Jones style Temple of Doom murder shenanigan was going to be built by a Lego Master Builder Jedi. And so it's very clearly described Lego bricks. I was going to say it was Mortise and Tenon if anyone complained. And he's referred to as a master builder at least twice, all that kind of stuff. And I had so many arguments ready to go, and then they just let me do it. And I was like, this is the greatest moment of my life. I love Lego Star Wars.
Yeah, there's places in manuscripts where, I guess I used a Salonian in Rise of the Red Blade, and I also had a Kababu Freak type character, walking in a robot with a goldfish bull belly, and it just in this kind of, it's like, please just give me this, just give me my little otter man, just please let me have a little otter man. So hopefully that sways them sometimes, and you're just like, I desperately, or I keep trying to bring the pink elephant back, I'm like, come on man, just let me slide a pink elephant into this comic. And I think that they like it when you beg.
They let me give a Star Destroyer to a criminal. And I remember the footnote, and the footnote was, I we have to give this to Booster because Tim is going to use it in one of his books. And an editor called me up and said, "Is Tim going to use this in one of his books?" I said, "Yep." And that was it.
Had you checked with me on that first?
Yeah.
Okay, we did. Sometimes the order of these things gets a little
Other things I didn't check with you on.
timey-wimey. Yes, and you should tell them what you wanted to call it, or told me you wanted to call it, and you didn't think they'd let you get away with
Well,
that.
I knew that. So this is a Star Destroyer that we're turning into a casino and a black market for illicit trade and stuff like that. It's all about business and everything. The obvious name, a venerable ship name, is Enterprise. I guess that was taken. So.
I guess the weirdest thing they didn't even raise any kind of fuss over is in Scoundrels, when Han and his group have done a heist and they've got this giant, it's a spherical safe because you can't, anything rectangular you can cut the corners off with a lightsaber. This thing you can't really get into. And we've gotten it free from its boundaries. It's going to be rolling away across the grounds here, and Han in armor with a whip thing to sort of get the crowd back out of its way is running in front of it, and he let me do that.
Mine I did get away with, and the one that I was most surprised I got away with, it was just now. I'm writing Star Wars: The Living Force, and there's an arc in this. This is about the Jedi Council on spring break. Qui-Gon Jinn challenges them to get out of the Jedi Council chamber, touch grass. Yeah, when was the last time people actually help somebody? And so they go on a road trip, and a significant section of the book has to do with basically a character I'd created who's more or less the founder of the Imperial, later Imperial, but the Republic training school, flight school. And I knew that he would have he would have a lot of students that would be members of the later Imperial elite from rich families. And I looked at the ages, like I do, to see if there's anybody out there. Normally we play, it's a big galaxy. You can't just have any random person that is in a movie. It should be somebody else. But I'm looking at the people and I say, I want to give this guy credibility by having somebody that's got a name. And I realized that somebody who is exactly the right age to be more or less a cabin boy on this ship would be Maximilian Veers. And this is only a thing that I was concerned about because there happens to be a account on the Bird app called Veers Watch by a gentleman who I have met who tracks every single appearance of Veers and every non-appearance of Veers by taking everything that comes out from Lucasfilm's licenses and saying, what's your latest book? Say any book. Okay. Well, anybody who's not in it. So The Force Awakens, no Veers. This is what he does. And I said, okay, they're just never going to allow this. And I said all the things saying, this is why it actually makes sense for him to be there, and it's not just fan service. There's a reason. And my editor said, okay, let's just see. And I got back the notes, and it says, we're here for it. And so Veers Watch shows up at New York Comic Con, and just exactly, and then his tweet when the book came out was, Star Wars: The Living Force against all possible odds. Veers.
Mine was literally Veers Watch will be so happy.
Oh yes, well there you go.
I was so scared to say anything because I got a review copy of that, and I was like, Veers Watch is going to lose their mind.
It was the most viral thing that came out associated with that book when he said that. So.
Next question, please.
Okay. Yeah, so quick question here is, and I'll be diplomatic in asking this. There's been a lot of not controversy, but there's been a lot of questions now coming out from like the movies that are coming out, right? Different writers have been switched and things like that. As writers of past and present, my thoughts are, what are you guys' thoughts on what's going on with like the shows right now, one seasons, and like in the movies? Is it something that they should be addressing authors like yourselves more? That's kind of my question.
We should all be in a writer's room right now.
Yeah, like, is there a union involved? Because then you definitely
Well, typically, movie makers do not think novelists know how to write movies, so they tend to keep us out of things. And to be fair, in the most part, they're probably right, because it's a very different medium. You can't get inside people's head. It's all dialogue and action and expressions and such. That being said, it would not hurt any of them to consult us on things, continuity, story structure, chemistry between characters, that sort of thing.
Even just a think tank.
Yeah, think tank would be great. You did something like that with the New Jedi Order, right? You guys mapped that out. So that's not movie sort of thing, but you could tell them what you did then.
But I mean, it was very much the writer's room kind of idea. That we got people together, we kicked around ideas, we set up what was going on. There was the initial meeting, and then there was a second meeting where we kind of, straightened things out and made sure that it was all going to work. And that's really, really useful. But Tim's point that it's a different medium, it really has got to be held. And I also have to say, look, all the people that are doing this stuff are Star Wars fans. I may not agree with their interpretation of Star Wars, but damn, I'm here for the shows. I mean, I'm watching them, I'm enjoying them. Is it what I would have done? Maybe not, but I can see why they did it, and I certainly can respect that.
I see the TV shows and movies kind of like history. Like, I don't see it as, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, I'm not sure if Andrew Jackson existed, but I'm really sure Obi-Wan Kenobi does. Which helps me better accept it, because instead of thinking of what I would have done differently, I'm like, that exists. In the same way that I don't think, oh, what happened yesterday in Kansas? I could have had a better output for that. Instead I just think like, wow, that happened, that exists now, that's canon, it's real. And so it's some kind of a weird neurodivergent brain tricks that I never get mad at it.
I think one of the things I really liked about the High Republic was I've never got to work with them. I got to experience the whole thing as a fan, which was amazing. But I really liked hearing stories about like the talks they had and all of the workshopping that they did. And I think that just makes storytelling stronger. Yes. And we get to do that a little bit with Story Group on our own each time anyway. But the collaborative part of Star Wars is one of my favorite parts of it. So every time there's like more people involved, I'm like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, I guess I feel like whatever the license is, whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, Batman, what's on screen is the wellspring. I guess to use a military metaphor, we're in the rear with the gear. We follow the army wherever it goes. We follow the people that are, where the money is, where all the attention is. We conform what we're doing to support these projects that they're doing, and that's increasingly in 2024, what the role of fiction, what the role of action figures, what the role of toys, what the role of video games is to try to push forward this multi-media thing going forward, which is Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever the thing is. So a lot of these things are questions above my pay grade.
You also have to put some of this stuff into perspective. The worst television show, more people will watch it than will ever buy our books.
That is absolutely true.
Okay, so our opinions, while we are all brilliant, our opinions are come fairly low on their scale, just because of the economy that they're dealing with.
But I also found, though, I reread Kenobi because it's one of my favorites after the show, and I was like, I can do both. I'm good. We're good. So I was like, they're both real. I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, Deborah Chow read Kenobi. Ewan McGregor read Kenobi. They were not going to film Kenobi because he's 15 years older than he was then. And because my novel was about his arrival, and they weren't going to be doing that. And they were going to do a different kind of story. If there had been a Kenobi 2, a sequel to the novel, it is very likely that the powers, all of the different powers that be, would have wanted it to be much more of a traditional novel with, Sith somewhere or something like that, and not have it be what it was, which was very, insular. And but I understand why they did it that way. And they didn't do anything to overwrite the book, and they used a major idea from it. So I'm like, okay.
Next question.
First of all, sorry for wearing the wrong uniform. I know it's quite possible.
May the force live long and prosper.
I love them both.
May the bat force live long and prosper. May the bat force live long and prosper.
I have a question about narrative voice. You're all working with established characters. There are literally millions of people who have seen those movies, watched those shows, have their own interpretation of this is what this character would say in this situation. And I'm just wondering about your process in capturing these voices of the characters. I remember reading Alliances and being really struck with Vader's POV because there were certain lines in there where I was like, this sounds like Anakin. Is this a little bit of Anakin peeking through here? So I'm just wondering how your processes come into this.
I don't know, it's kind of, you get into the mind of the skin of the character, and everything you've seen in the movies or things like the Clone Wars and such should funnel into how you're seeing things from that person's eyes. It's hard to explain. It's kind of, you want to mess up a golfer, ask him how he does his swing, because then he'll start thinking about it. But it's something that I think just comes with practice to a large extent. You just, okay, I'm now Darth Vader. How do I see things? How do I speak? What are my thought processes and such? So for me, it just, after all these years of writing stories, it just kind of is natural for me.
I mean, you know, you do your research, you watch the cogent portions of the film over and over, and, you know, try and make sure that your character sounds like who you think they ought to. I guarantee, even if you get it perfect, 5% of the people out there will hate you because it's wrong. Okay, and so, you know, you just live with that. But you try your best to make it authentic to who you see the character as.
I believe Charlie Chaplin once came in third in a Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest.
My favorite part of this process is for most of this, you know, they just accept that we're really into this world and we do a lot of research and we watch the movies on repeat and they kind of trust us. And then if we don't quite nail it, they help us catch it. But going into Rise of the Red Blade, we had discussed showing Anakin's knighting ceremony, which Mike Chen had just covered in Brotherhood, and I was going to show a different aspect of it. And they were like, oh, you can play with Yoda, but here's the Yoda document. There is an official how to write Yoda documents. The details, what the do's and do nots of how to write Yoda, which I've never gotten anything like that out of Star Wars ever. Like you think when you're going to start writing these books that they're going to send you like the Bible or the dossier or the rule. Like there's nothing. But there's a Yoda document.
For me, a large part of writing voice includes like the physicality of a character. And for the Clone Wars, or for Ahsoka, it was pretty easy because Ashley's voice and manner is quite similar to Ahsoka's. But when it came time to write Kira and Dryden Voss, it basically just meant that I watched all of the Game of Thrones scenes where anything got lit on fire and The Knight's Tale like 100 billion times, and then wrote like evil Chaucer and like Daenerys, but she can't light things on fire. In terms of like how they moved and how they held their faces and then that kind of stuff. It also meant that I got to watch The Knight's Tale a lot, which was great.
You know, I guess I'm a mimic or something, but I can hear the voices of the characters, you know, constantly, and usually I have a lot of different characters. I just had a fun moment. Not an hour ago, I met Santiago Cabrera over here. He played Captain Rios in Star Trek Picard. He's like Han Solo, except he drinks more, smokes more, and has a more active social life. But it was strange because this person's voice was in my head for almost a year because that's the only novel I've ever written where it's all in one point of view. And so every word was his. And what I find is as long as they've been on screen, I can write it. The hardest time I have is writing anybody else's characters. And this, whatever the franchise is, if it's a supporting character that has never appeared on screen, to my ear, it's not going to be the same as the person who created that character.
Okay, next question. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
All right, hi. Thank you guys for being here. I've been, reading your works.
Just real quick, you all are hearing drums. I'm not having a
There's not ours.
All right. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Thank you guys for being here. I've been reading your works, throughout my life, and I still read Star Wars today. So thank you for that. I guess you kind of got into this a little bit already, but when it comes to the creative process, especially with descriptions, which are so important in books, what are some of your inspirations in coming up with certain, descriptions? Like in, I think in the X-Wing series, like you would have a material like plasteel or something like that. How do you guys come up with that? And how much freedom do you have to sort of make your own descriptions, and how much do you have to go into like the Star Wars mythos and keep true to that?
I go relatively light on description, just whatever the readers are going to need is what I put in. I will tell you one of the tricks of the trade from my point of view. I need a planet here. Okay, I'll first pull out the map of the galaxy. Okay, this is the section I'm going for. Okay, here are several likely planets. Wikipedia, 3 pages. Wikipedia, 8 pages. Wikipedia, it's mentioned on the map. Great, I'll take that planet because nobody's done anything with it. I'm not going to get mixed up with anybody.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, when I was doing stuff, again, I read Tim's books, read the other Star Wars novels that were out, and you just begin to notice things like plasteel for our Crete. This is what they call these, and so those are going to be the nouns that you're going to go ahead and use. I think the other thing that was a lot of fun when I was doing iJedi, Tim and I talked on the phone a very great deal, and so having somebody else to bounce ideas off was really, really helpful, because you can be sitting there creating in a vacuum, but you're never going to know what sort of effect it has until you talk to somebody else and they go, oh yeah, that's cool, I can use that, or I can see this working.
So, one of the hardest times I've had with this was writing Black Spire, because Galaxy's Edge was under construction, and I had a PDF of, you can buy it now, that's like the Art of Black Spire, that was just all of the information together with no index and no way to search for things. So you're just scrolling through 169 pages of the PDF. So I got one call with the Imagineers to ask questions. And my first question was, what does it smell like? And they both stopped and they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, Pandora smells. It has a smell. The Haunted Mansion has a smell. What does Galaxy's Edge smell like? And they stopped, like, these looks of panics, and were like, meat? Because the only smell that was engineered so far was that Ronto Roasters was just pumping out barbecue. So it was like, you guys, you could have had like a scent empire. Like, you could have been selling this perfume, candles, whatever, but like all we've got is like meat. And then I got to go to the opening of Galaxy's Edge on the West Coast, and I had one night to get to go through it for the preview night. And then I had like 2 days to edit the entire book to match the place that I had just walked through. And you're just trying to think of what's most immediate to the character there. Like, when you walk into the Galaxy's Edge, what is the first thing that you see? Well, that's going to be the first thing your character sees. But then the second thing is going to be like, well, if they're a droid person, they're going to notice the droids. If they're, a person who makes money by thieving, they're going to be looking for rich people. So it's whatever is the most immediate to your character is going to be the thing that they notice first. And whether they're a person that is highly sensitive and very aware of things versus a person who might be kind of, blithe and bland and kind of walking off the cliff like the fool, will determine how much they see and how much it means to them.
I did not know that much about fashion and or dresses until I started writing the Padme books. But fortunately by then I'd already had like a year going to conventions thanks to Ahsoka, so I'd started to meet these people, none of whom I could tell that I was writing a Padme book, but I could ask questions like, so how long did it take you to make that dress? Is it heavy? Do you wish there was an escape hatch? Which I then put in the book. So I think that was sort of there's some very real world things that you can look at, even if it's not, I ask cosplayers a lot when I'm doing costume design or hair design or character design. And I also like to take people's houses and turn them into spaceships, because it saves me from having to build them myself.
The Living Force takes place mostly on a single planet, Quen, which was another one of these things like Tim talked about, where there was I needed a planet that had been mentioned many, many, many times, but nobody had ever set foot on. And just lucked out that it happened to be in the right place. And you know, I realized, okay, I want this setting, this setting, this setting, this setting, this setting, because I have vignettes with all 12 members of the Jedi Council here, there, or whatever, in these different combinations. And got the dry erase board out, and pretty soon I had maps, and pretty soon I had a world. And you know, the whole thing about this is making it feel real to you guys, and first it's got to feel real to us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Next question.
And we put the map in the book. There you go.
Thank you. So you wanted to ask a question about crossing media, and to shape the question, you know that up until recently it was decades in between trilogies. And so for people who love Star Wars and couldn't get enough of it, our perception of the Star Wars universe was shaped by the media that was available, which is the graphic novels, the novels, I read 80 plus novels, and the video games. And so about crossing media and using Lost Tribe of the Sith as an example, it starts as novel and it ends with a graphic novel. Same thing with Knight Errant, you know, again, good example, because there's an embedded story there and that shapes the perception of the Star Wars universe. What are the challenges with crossing from a novel into a graphic novel or vice versa?
Well, we've also had ones where comics have adapted novels as well, and they're different media, of course. You know, one of the challenges just in doing comics in general is you never know who the artist is going to be necessarily from issue to issue to issue to issue, and you know, the one thing I've been writing many more novels lately than comics, in part because I like the ability to control the camera all the time and know that you know, I'm going to communicate these things, because you do get into situations where you know, things are not necessarily going to be as visual as you need them to be. The Kenobi novel was originally going to be a graphic novel, and we realized it would be 3,000 pages long. Because you know, it's like an Italian Western. I mean, it's a big sprawling thing, and a lot of time is spent in a store. And you know, I think the trick is you kind of want to use each medium to its advantage wherever possible.
Yeah, and I think writing from like something that had been animated, when I had seen like notes for how the throne room fight was going to go, but at the time it was not inside, it was outside. And so when they asked me to write the Battle of Mandalore, they're like, can you write about 1,000 words about the Battle of Mandalore? Try not to describe anything, and you can't have any action scenes. And I was like, this is going to sound weird, but you've come to the right place because I'm great at feelings. And so they can't do that in the book, or on the screen, right? We have the music, we have the light in the throne room, we have all that broken glass all over the place, we have the opposing color schemes, we have all of that, but we can't see inside of their heads. And that's what I can do in the book, and I think that's sort of how you go back and forth. And again, I think the High Republic has done an outstanding job of that, because almost all of the characters have been in an audio drama, in a comic book, in an adventure comic, in a novel. Like one of them's been on television. Like it just keeps going, and I think that's really cool.
So the book Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade is based on a Vader comic by Charles Soule, and two kind of throwaway Inquisitor characters who did not even have names or numbers. And it ends in a very specific way that I had to write with that in mind throughout the whole book. So I had, you know, like maybe 30 pages of these two characters to go on to write a book around. And the hardest part is the angry people who are like, why did you do this? And I'm like, I didn't. Charles Soule did that. You can go to Charles Soule and you can yell at him, because he's a lawyer and he's probably stronger than me and doesn't cry as much. And then I've also got a couple that were like, why did you do an author's note? And I was like, because they told me to. This is my job. I do what Star Wars tells me to do. So just a lot of the answers. Our job is to do the very best we can with what they give us and what they ask us to do within the limitations that they give us. and then the things that change along the way. But yeah, blame Charles.
That's gonna be my argument going forward. Nobody tell him.
When I was doing stuff, I was working with Dark Horse Comics to do the X-Wing comic, and I was also writing the X-Wing novels, and the comics were taking place about 2.5 years before the novels were. So since I was the guy doing both of them, it was relatively easy to introduce characters in one and then have them show up later on, you know, because I was basically in control of their continuity at that point. The toughest thing we had to do, the novels had, the comics started coming out when the novels did. The novels got popular enough that people wanted to see Corrin in the comic, but it had been established in the novels that Corrin had never met Wedge, he had never met these other people in the squadron. So I had to pick out the characters that I knew were never going to be in the novels and have them be the ones that he interacted with. And ended up throwing at the end of that story, one of them, they talk about, hey, you know, he might make a good recruit for the Rogues. And one of the other ones that never appears in the novels just says, over my dead body. And so it's been left hanging. We have no idea what happened to that character, but it was a very deliberate thing for readers to go, ooh, she's not there. Is this, you know, is this the end of that? So it was really nice being able to you know, throw things back and forth and play with that stuff that way.
The other nice thing about comics, I'll just mention, is in a novel, it's very hard for somebody to do something in the background that the characters don't notice because you have to put it into the book that somebody has to notice this. In a comic, you can have all this stuff going in the background that your characters don't notice, but the readers will. So that is one place where the different medium actually can work to your advantage.
Thank you for your question. Next question.
Talked a little bit about iJedi. Wanted to share one of my favorite characters, Grand Horn, Corsac, rogue pilot, becomes a Jedi. All of you guys have characters that may not be canon today. After Disney purchased them, do you guys have a favorite character that you wish you would elaborate more with if the project came along?
Okay, the obvious one, Mara Jade. Yep. I keep nudging Lucasfilm. You know, can I write a book? And the answers come back basically someplace between no and heck no. So I don't know what's going on.
I think there are some of the rogue characters that would be a lot of fun. You know, and because the new Jedi Order, you know, very specifically was killed with what's going on, and for good reason, because we did kill Chewie. But a lot of the younger Jedi and you know, Corrin's children and stuff like that. Since Corrin came back in Kenobi, I'm going to assume that he's now canon again. Which I have to say, I was really happy because there were many misguided parents who named children Corrin. And I felt horrible when he was taken out of the canon. And now that he's back in, you know, hopefully these kids are not getting picked on in grade school.
It's just those kids aren't in grade school anymore, Mike.
Okay, grandchildren.
It's no worse than the kids who named their children Paul Bunyan.
Well,
I started writing right after the transfer of power, but Phasma is alive. I didn't spend that much of my life making her invincible to have her just like fall backwards a little bit. So yeah, I'm just waiting for the day that I get to write the third Phasma book.
She's basically wearing a spaceship.
Yeah, and we know which one she's wearing.
It's a little personal. I can never remember the name. It's the droid that calls people meatbag in the video game.
HK-47.
That one, yeah. HK-47 sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, same era. You know, Zane Carrick and everybody from Knights of the Old Republic, I've said several times, there's absolutely no reason that the Zane Carrick story could not be transplanted to the Clone Wars era or somewhere near about it because it was already a riff on what if you did the prequels and didn't know that Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker? What if you didn't know the Emperor was who the Emperor was? But you know, all that said, the books are still coming out, and we've actually probably sold more copies of those comics, which they just reprinted volume 1 of that, and the omnibus is actually getting reprinted in March. So I'm sort of like, okay, well, you know, they could also easily, if they wanted to, they could do anything they want. There was a Star Wars 108, which continued the Marvel series as if it had never ended way back in the day. So, yeah, I mean, they can do whatever they want.
Just one note. If this is bothering you, imagine it's Big and Dan in the modal notes. Suddenly we're back on.
Yeah, it's pretty. The music is really distracting, and I'm sorry.
It's just good old-fashioned Star Wars jizz.
Can I ask Tim and Mike, you two were around for that era. Who did that? Who named the genre of music jizz? Or is that a question I need to ask Kevin? Well, it first appeared.
It was Kevin. Yeah.
I did some research, and it did first appear in the Tales of Mos Eisley anthology that Kevin edited.
Then it's Kevin's fault.
Okay.
All in favor of Kevin's fault?
The motion
carries.
Yeah. Okay. You were all here for that. You all witnessed it. It's on camera. It's recorded. It's Kevin's fault. Okay. So, thank you for that question. Next question. I'm glad we solved that. Thank you, Delilah.
Hi. I came in late, so if somebody already asked this, I'll just go sit back down. I'm trying to create one of my own, so what is your method, or if you're open to revealing it, your secret to creating a good Star Wars character name?
For minor characters, just sort of, I pull out one of the baby name books I've gotten to look for something good. For a major name, I want it to flow well, look different from other names. Nowadays, with a lot of the audio, I want to try to make it sound different. If possible, have some kind of a meaning. Mara Jade flows nicely. Mara means bitterness that fit the character. So I take more care with the major ones, but often I wind up going through the baby name books, looking for something that either will serve as is or a little bit of tweaking will make the kind of character I'm looking for.
Yeah, you kind of read through the characters that already exist. I mean, when I was looking at Corran and what I was going to call him, the Corellians we knew were Han Solo and Wedge Antilles. And so those names have kind of got a rhythm to them and a noun in there somewhere. So for Corran, I knew that it had to be, there had to be a noun in there, and then just I wanted a good, strong first name, and Corran was what seemed to work out. And I named the baby books are real good for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's often if you just take a normal name and twist it a little bit, and then add a noun. And then for planets, you just walk around the house muttering to yourself like you're going to catch it by surprise, like, Warple! Eventually something happens. This is where I got Vashka, my first one. I was just walking around the house being like, I'm a god now. I have to come up with a planet. Oh, God.
I do a lot of, keyboard smash and then make vowels so the audiobook readers aren't, horrified. But also, with what Tim said, the baby name books I use websites because they're more accessible for me. But I tend to just take someone because my nieces and nephews are all starting to Star Wars now. I'm I'm just gonna take your name, change it a little bit, and then be I named that character after you. Obviously, I'm the cool one, so that kind of
I tend to take the list of the character names and break them down against the alphabet to make sure I'm not reusing the same first letter over and over again. And this was a problem on the Living Force book when I realized we got 3 members of the Jedi Council whose names start with Y. So, which is Yaddle, Yoda, and Uriel Proof. And we also got to deal with Uriel Proof's name in the book. We decided it was customary for his people to be called Master Uriel and not Master Proof because we thought that would sound too silly. But we now do have an in-universe moment where he says, you know, on my planet, that would have been a very honorable name. It's not my fault that in Galactic Common it sounds like the end of a magic trick.
I'm trying to imagine like the British audiobook reader being like, oh, I can't say this.
We had these discussions. Or didn't.
Another technique I remember reading about J.R.R. Tolkien would sometimes take a word or a foreign word and add something to it. So Beorn is the German word Bern for bear, put an O in it and made the shape-shifting bear in The Hobbit. So sometimes you can play with words that way and it's a lot of fun.
So we've got, thank you so much for the question. We've got 5 minutes left, so we're gonna do lightning round for the last 2 questions.
Hi, I'm a newer Star Wars fan the last few years. The thought of reading the books is daunting because I didn't even know how many. If you're gonna recommend one story to read to someone who's never read Star Wars but is familiar with the universe, which books or story would you recommend?
Ours.
What is your favorite aspect of Star Wars? Like, what's your favorite character or place or the thing you love most about it?
What hooked me was the Clone Wars. I love Anakin from the Clone Wars. Not Vader, love Anakin.
So you, what, Brotherhood?
Brotherhood is good.
Mike Chen.
The Living, not the Living Force. What was the Master and Apprentice, maybe?
Yeah. Master and Apprentice is also good. Anything by Claudia Gray is amazing.
Anyone going?
Anything by Claudia Gray. So she has Master and Apprentice and Lost Stars, which is more the original trilogy, but still amazing.
And she's got Leia.
And-
and Leia, the Leia books.
I would just mention the original classic movies of New Hope, Empire Strikes Back. I did a book called Scoundrels, which is basically Ocean's 11 with Han running it. So if you like heist, if you've seen the 3 movies, that's all you need. It's a standalone, but I wanted to call it Solo's 11 and they wouldn't let me. So that gives you the flavor. If you like a heist thing, that would be a good, just a standalone type.
I was actually going to say, though, too, if Anakin is the thing that she's into, Thrawn Alliances.
Yeah. Thrawn Alliances, it's 2 parallel stories, Thrawn and Anakin and Padme doing an adventure, and then 17 years later, in the same part of space, Thrawn and Vader are sent out to figure out something the Emperor has seen. So the stories go back and forth, so you get a lot of Anakin in it. You're stuck with Vader too, but you get a lot of Anakin. And Padme.
Thank you.
Labyrinth of Evil.
Last question.
Yeah. I'll try to make it quick. Y'all mentioned how great you'd think it'd be to be part of a think tank or part of a collaboration in a writing thing. And it kind of made me wonder, who else on the panel next to you would you jump at the opportunity to co-author a sequel to a book that they've worked on or on a project together? Whose story and whose character has really grabbed you that you'd love to the opportunity to work together on a story with them?
I've done a few collaborations. I don't work well with that. I prefer doing my own sort of thing. So nothing against any of these people. It's nobody.
What about the collaborations we did?
I was younger then.
Fair point.
And those were also short story things, not full novels.
I'd be happy to work with anybody. The nice thing about working with other writers is that everybody's going to have skills that are going to complement each other, or they're going to fill in where I'm extremely weak, and having somebody else's ideas, sparks me to try and do something even better. So,
When I was doing the Padme books, Mike Chen was writing Brotherhood and Greg Pak was doing the Vader comics. And so I had a couple phone conversations with Greg Pak between novels and basically was like, oh yeah, that'll make it hurt even more when I do this. Like just exchanging notes back and forth, which was fantastic. And then Mike basically sent me a message and was like, what character can I have? And I was like, sister, please take sister. And he did. So that kind of stuff is always fun.
Yeah, I got to, writing Black Spire, work back and forth with Zoraida Cordova, who was the other Star Wars author working in the Galaxy's Edge world at the time, and we did the same thing where we're like, oh, you know what would really hurt people?
And, you know, I edited Mike for 10 years. So there's probably a nonfiction book that we could probably do in 5 seconds.
No, yeah.
With all that stuff. Oh, yeah. And Mike's X-Wing stuff as well, of course. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Really quickly, before we wrap up, I know, where can people find you for the rest of the show for everyone? Can they find you for the rest of the show?
I mean, usually that hallway outside.
The hallway outside?
Yeah, I've got several other panels and signings. It's on the app. My schedule is the easiest way to find them because I don't have a table of my own this time.
Yeah, for me, I'm running, doing a lot of how to write workshops. So Inman, which is in the basement of this building, turn right and hopefully don't get lost.
I'm Delilah S. Dawson everywhere, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Facebook, all that, and I have little graphics for my whole DragonCon schedule. And yeah, if you catch me in the hall, like DragonCon, most places we can be like, oh yeah, right outside outside the door there's books, and here it's like, if you want the books, okay, you go outside, go up 3 levels, go over 3, down 4, get in line. The line will take you 6 hours, but like, you catch us outside, we'll sign stuff.
Okay.
No, I'm literally just gonna be hanging outside.
Several of us are going to be at the Star Wars author signing tomorrow, which is 2:30 to 3:30 in the Weston Overlook. I am set up at Side Street Books several times daily, which is 3201 in the vendor hall. I was reminded by the ghost that Monday is the 10th anniversary of the release of A New Dawn. It's been that long, and we do have lots of copies of the new edition of it, which actually has the colors that I wanted on the cover in the beginning. And if I can make it, anybody like to hear a book announcement? It's not really a big one, but this came to me from China the other day. The Tales of Kenobi Barnes & Noble Special Edition has just been reprinted and will be in stores probably in October. And these are the ones that are on the gift shelf there, and they have it's half Kenobi and the other half is The Approaching Storm by Alan Foster.
So, thank you everyone on the panel, and thank you all for being here. This was a delightful time. Thank you all so much. Thank you all.